Welcome. Welcome. My name is David Stefansson. I'm the chair of Varberg. This meeting will be conducted in English as advertised. On behalf of Varberg, the Norwegian Embassy in Reykjavik, and the National Commissioner of the Icelandic Police, I welcome you to this meeting. What we want to do here is to understand how our neighbors in Norway are conducting their risk assessments. We want to learn from them, and we want to understand how they are making this risk assessment and what we can learn from it and how we can cooperate. We need to understand and develop our own risk assessment, and for that we have here also the Icelandic Police Commissioner with a few words later on. But I would like in the beginning to ask Þorbjörg Sigríður Gunnlaugsdóttir, the Minister of Justice, to come up here with some opening remarks. Þorbjörg.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is my privilege to welcome you here today on this conference on the open assessments of threats and security, where the focus is on the Norwegian example. And I learned a few minutes ago that the Norwegian government, as late as today, released its new strategy in this regard. Security, yes. And in Icelandic, we would say that this is about öryggi og áhættu. The Nordic countries share a commitment to democratic governance and trust between citizens and institutions. The world we live in now is often unpredictable, and in such an environment, the foundation of security must not only be vigilance and preparedness, but also transparency, dialogue, like here today, and cooperation, and not the least, responsibility. Recent turbulence in international affairs and ongoing wars worldwide have significantly changed the security threats in Europe. All Europe is aware of this situation. European solidarity and Nordic solidarity is greater now than ever, and increased focus is on defense, deterrence, resilience, as well as identifying security threats. Here in Iceland, the government has taken recent actions by increasing numbers of police officers. That was one of the first steps by our new government. The Icelandic Coast Guard has put greater attention on monitoring submarine communications cable and the voyages of suspicious vessels. This fall, I intend to introduce a comprehensive review on legislation regarding our Civil Protection Act, legislation regarding almannavarnir in Icelandic, which will be a major legal improvement in resilience and crisis preparedness. Also, very importantly, our government is currently working on a new security and defense policy. And our policy is intended to frame the main security challenges we are facing now, with an emphasis on external threats. External threats and highlighting Iceland's goals in international security and defense cooperation, and discussing the necessary preparedness and capabilities that need to be in place here in Iceland. The topic here today is of great importance, and I look forward to hearing about the Norwegian experience, and of course with the intention of learning from your experience, where security institutions produce open threat assessments that inform both government as well as the public. This approach enhances trust and resilience, and it aligns closely with our own direction here in Iceland. In recent years, Iceland has taken several deliberate steps to strengthen our national approach to terrorism threat assessment. And we now operate under a 5-level threat framework that allows us to better categorize risks, align with our Nordic partners, not in the least, and provide clearer communication to the public. The National Security Unit here in Iceland of the National Commissioner, NSU, of the Icelandic Police is responsible for issuing these assessments. It is the National Security Unit of the National Commissioner that issues these assessments on behalf of us, most recently in April this year with a national terrorism threat evaluation. The unit works in close cooperation with the Nordic counterparts, including the institutions represented here today. And this collaboration has grown significantly under the current National Commissioner. Ladies and gentlemen, threat levels are, of course, not merely technical labels. Their purpose is to support a broad and cooperative approach to national security. The information they reflect is shared with emergency responders, government agencies, and key stakeholders, enabling them to identify vulnerabilities, assess readiness, and take appropriate preventive measures. At the same time, I would like to highlight that public awareness plays a crucial role. The threat level system is not meant to alarm, but to inform, and it does not require immediate action from citizens, but simply has the role of reminding us all to remain alert, aware, and connected. This is the essence of democratic resilience, a society where knowledge flows, where institutions work together, and where citizens are part of the security dialogue, like here today. When we are transparent about risks, we build trust. And that's my hope here today, that that will be the outcome of a dialogue like this one here. When we share responsibility, we strengthen the whole. I thank you all for your presence and participation here today, and I wish you all a productive and thought-provoking afternoon. Thank you.
Now we move to our next two speakers coming from Norway. The first one is Kjell Inge Bjerge, who is a director for the Norwegian Institute of Defense Studies, a research institution under the Norwegian Armed Forces. He is a professor there and director. I give the floor to you, Kjell.
Thank you very much, Minister, ambassadors, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for the invitation to come to beautiful Iceland and share some reflections on security and defense from Norway. It is an honor to be here with Ættingjar okkar á Íslandi. I'm trying. First, a disclaimer. I do not represent Norwegian authorities like the next speaker, Hanne Blomberg, from the Norwegian Security Police Service. I'm an historian and director of the Norwegian Institute for Defense Studies at the Norwegian Defense University College. That is an independent research institution operating under the law of higher education that protects the freedom of academic institutions in Norway. At the same time, my institute is part of the defense sector and do some classified research, and we do give policy briefs to the authorities, mostly on China, Russia, NATO, transatlantic relations, and Norwegian security policy, including total defense, which I think is a key word for this seminar. We are also responsible for the National Higher Executive Course in Norway, a course both our distinguished ambassador and the eminent next speaker knows very well. The senior course is unique in a Nordic context. It brings together central stakeholders of the Norwegian total defense so that they can learn to know each other and to develop knowledge and the concept of total defense together. Total defense is also an important aspect of the 3 open threat and risk assessments addressed at this seminar, which I will come back to. I will give some outside-in and critical perspectives on the Norwegian way of dealing with the very dangerous and complex security situation we are facing, a situation that is thoroughly described in the 3 assessments. Russia is the defining threat for Norway, and the wide spectrum of hybrid means they are using in the ongoing war against the West is a huge challenge for the Norwegian system of governance. The same is to be said about the threats from China, Iran, and non-state terrorist actors and organizations, but for now and the foreseeable future, Russia overshadows most other threats. At the heart of how Norway tries to cope with this situation is the Norwegian system of governance. It might sound a bit boring, but the system in itself is extremely important given the hybrid threats, and this leads me back to the title of my introduction, Coordinated Open Threat and Risk Assessments. Why, how, and what? I will start with the what and how, and at the end of my introduction, come back to the why from a security policy and military perspective. I believe the next speaker, Hanne, will address domestic threats, so I leave that for her. Okay, the what and how. Let's see if this works. The what and how. Norway has 3 security and intelligence services. First, the National Security Authority. That is a preventive authority responsible for securing critical infrastructure and governmental institutions in Norway. Back in 2003, the Security Authority was the first one out with an annual open risk assessment, RISK 2003. The point was to identify and prioritize between potential security risks and to share this with the public in order to engage the public, increase public risk awareness, and to get help from the public to prevent and mitigate risks. Second, the next year, in 2004, the Police Security Service followed on and published for the first time the first annual Open National Threat Assessment, the NTA 2004. The police identified domestic threats. No surprise, a few years after 9/11, international terrorism was high on the agenda. As for the Security Authority, the aim was to increase public awareness and to get help from the public to detect suspicious activity and incidents. Number 3 is the Military Intelligence Service. This one, the biggest and most dominant one, was more reluctant to share its threat assessments with the public, mostly because of their very close cooperation with foreign intelligence services. However, under General Kjell Granhagen, then head of military intelligence, in 2011 they concluded that the gains from open threat assessments were bigger than the potential downsides. They also noted that the experiences with open assessments were good, and a culture of more openness had developed among the secret services in Norway. Hence, in 2011, the first open annual focus report was published by the intelligence service. The argument was exactly the same as for the Security Authority and the Police Security Service. The public awareness when it came to external threats against Norway had to be better, and by sharing the military threat assessments, the public was invited to report suspicious activity and incidents. During the Cold War, such public awareness and engagement had been a crucial part of the total defense concept in Norway and of the national readiness. Let me give you an example. The Norwegian coastline is the second longest in the world. Of course, the population along the coast is one of the best sensors for detecting suspicious naval activity 24/7, in particular submarine activity. In the 1970s, for instance, observations from the coastal population resulted in detection and hunt for several hostile submarines deep inside the Norwegian fjords. All in all, to sum it up, the main purposes of all three risk and threat assessments were increased public awareness, get assistance from the public, and to strengthen total defense and resilience. However, when the Intelligence Service published its first open assessment in 2011, and all three were out in the open, there was no coordination between them. They were developed and published separately, two by the Minister of Defense, i.e. the risk and the intelligence assessments, and the national threat assessments from the police by the Minister of Defense, separated. To put it simple, this fragmentation was inadequate given the risk and threat situation that emerged around the millennium. Over the past 20 years or so, the security situation and threat landscape for Norway and all the Nordic countries have changed dramatically. In fact, it has both become increasingly worse and it has become much more complex and complicated. Everything is connected to everything, to quote the former Norwegian Prime Minister Gro Harlem Brundtland. Today, we are in a state of global strategic competition, and the most likely risks and threats are non-military. It is a wide range of hostile activities, from economic warfare with tariffs and trade war and so on, hostile investments, just to name a few, to influence campaigns, criminal activity, sabotage, subversion, cyber attacks, and so on and so forth. Both the worsening security situation and the increased complexity explain why Norwegian authorities now coordinate their threat and risk assessments. Behind me, you can see the three agency chiefs present their coordinated assessments earlier this year. The aim is still the same: increased public awareness, engaging the public, and by that, strengthen the total defense. The coordinated and joint presentation underlines to the public that this is a dangerous situation we have today, where everything is connected to everything, and that they need to build resilience together. I know this might sound a bit strange, but to witness three agency chiefs giving a joint presentation is quite unique in Norway, and the same is to be said about the other Nordic countries. The governance model in Norway and the other Nordic countries is very sectorized, meaning that each minister of the government is solely responsible for a specific sector and must answer to the Norwegian Parliament for that sector. In other words, military threats are the Minister of Defense responsibility, and civilian threats like terrorism and other forms of crime are the Minister of Justice responsibility, and so on. In peacetime, which is most of the time, the Minister of Justice is responsible for detecting and managing threats and crises in Norway. including major national crises like the horrible act of terror on the 22nd of July 2011, with the bombing of the government building that took 8 lives and the following massacre on 69 young people outside of Oslo. Over time, the sectorized governance model has led to a stovepiping of responsibilities in Norway. When it comes to security and defense, this worked quite well during the Cold War and in the 1990s, because the security threats that the Norwegian government had to deal with back then were clearly defined as either military or civilian, and threat number 1 was the military one from the Soviet bloc. However, as mentioned, and as we all know, this has changed during the last 20 years, and today we are in a situation with very few clear-cut distinctions between different kinds of threats, as it is described in the 3 risk and threat assessments. Are the threats military or civilian? Are they kinetic or non-kinetic? Are they coming from state actors or from non-state actors? Are they coming from outside of Norway or from the inside? Are they local or regional threats, national threats? And how to attribute them? I might be stating the obvious here, but a stovepiped public management is clearly not fit for dealing with this complex picture. Hence, the coordination of assessments is a big step in the right direction. Coordination builds common ground for strengthening national security. When all the security agencies agree on risks and threats, it is much easier for the Prime Minister and the government to make national priorities. And today, ladies and gentlemen, on the 8th of May, the Norwegian Liberation Day, Prime Minister Jonas Gahr Støre is presenting the first ever national security strategy of Norway. This strategy builds on the coordinated assessments and could not have been developed without them. The idea is that the national security strategy is a first step and that it will give guidance for plans and strategies to come in all sectors relating to national security. This is a huge step for Norway towards a more comprehensive national approach, and as you recognize, it's quite similar to the American hierarchy of documents, with the American national strategy on top, and where all other plans and strategies are expected to be linked to the top strategy. The new Norwegian strategy presented today emphasizes the concept of total defense, strengthened armed forces within the framework of NATO, and closer ties to what we call close allies. That is the Nordic countries, of course, including Iceland. It is Poland, it is France, it is Germany, and the UK, and the United States of America. Allied deterrence is described in the new strategy as a combination of conventional and nuclear capabilities. The strategy also includes a strong economy as a vital security asset, together with securing energy supplies and so on. As I mentioned in the beginning, the most dreaded and deadly threat against Norway and the other Nordic countries is today military, and it comes from Russia. Norway is therefore planning to use 1,635 billion kroner, probably more, on defense over the next 12 years. On this, I have three concerns. First, given the threat assessments emphasizing hybrid threats, the question can be asked, are huge military investments without similar investments in civilian preparedness sufficient? Should perhaps some of the defense billions have been spent on a civilian preparedness in parallel? Second, the most urgent danger right now, and that is also addressed in the new security strategy. The most urgent danger right now is Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine. A Russian victory will have dramatic consequences for Europe's security in both the short and the long term. Now, Russia is weakened economically and militarily. However, if they win the war one way or another, in a short time, they will be back demographically, economically, and militarily. Over the past couple of years, they have transformed their entire economy and production lines into a war machinery. In 5 to 10 years, they will be a significant threat to the whole of Europe if they win the Ukraine war. So, it is a no-brainer that the Europeans should support, assist, and help Ukraine as much as it can. And that is, to be honest, far more than we have done until now. For Norway, more of the defense billions could perhaps be given to Ukraine instead of buying more tanks for Norway. Third, a challenge also mentioned in the new security strategy is the uncertain transatlantic relationship and the implications for NATO. No doubt, the community of shared values across the Atlantic is challenged today. Do we still have a common Euro-Atlantic set of liberal democratic values? Question mark. The mere fact that this question can be asked should cause big concerns. NATO is based on shared values. Without common basic values, the security guarantee of the alliance is not credible. However, and this is my very important last point, for Norway, Iceland, Greenland, and the UK, much of the American security guarantee is based on American self-interest. As long as the Americans are threatened by strategic Russian submarines from the Kola Peninsula, they need to keep us as close allies and to defend our territories. This is very simple. Just look at the map. Because of the war in Ukraine, Russia is severely weakened on the land and on the air side. And if you count, for instance, the number of F-35s in Northern Europe, you come to 434. That is an overwhelming force. The Russians, they have no chance against this firepower. And you can also see with Finland and Sweden in NATO, the supply and logistical lines, the network in the Nordic countries, is substantial. So we have a conventional, we are stronger than the Russians on land and air. The remaining military threat, and this threat is not influenced by the war in Ukraine, and that is the naval threat from Russia. You can see the military installations in the Arctic. All of them are intact, and they have massive strategic capability placed in the Arctic. This threat remains, and it is not influenced by the war in Ukraine. It is a threat to us, and it is a big threat to the US, and that is very important. Because if you see the scenarios we are working on, the strategic capabilities of the Russians located at the Kola Peninsula need to get into the open oceans in case of crisis and war. And as you know, of course, they need to pass through the Beer Gap and the Guyuk Gap to get into the oceans and become invincible. So the strategic importance of this area here and this area here is increasingly important today, which means that no matter what happens in Ukraine, I think, this threat will remain, and the Americans will be very aware of it, and they will need to get it mitigated. Just a little map of the seabed to illustrate my point further at the end. So by that, ladies and gentlemen, that was my presentation. I think I should leave the floor right away to Hanne. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Ambassador. My name is Hanne Blomberg, and I am head of the Strategic Analysis and Outreach in the Norwegian Police Security Service. And it's a pleasure being here today in Reykjavik to talk about our threat assessments, our outreach activity, and our strategic communication. And my goal for today is twofold. My first goal is to offer some insights into how we, as a security service, aim to contribute to public debate in Norway, and how we try to do that in an efficient and balanced and nuanced and useful way. My second goal is to give you the key takeaways from our threat assessment for 2025, so you can be familiar with exactly what it is that we try to communicate. So, let me start off with a few words about the Norwegian Police Security Service. We are, as Kjell Inge already said, Norway's domestic intelligence and security service. And our main responsibility is to prevent serious crimes that threaten national security. And our focus is on threats and threat actors that are operating within Norway, that is inside Norway borders. And these threats include threats related to intelligence, to sabotage, the proliferation of weapons of mass destruction, terrorism, extremism, as well as threat to dignitaries. And in addition to preventing serious crimes, we shall also support Norwegian authorities in decision-making in security matters. And we share this duty with our two sister services, the Norwegian Intelligence Service, the NIS, and the Norwegian National Security Authority, the NNSA. And together, the three of us, we form the community of secret services in Norway, and we provide decision support through different processes, very often coordinated, to the government, to ministries, to directorates, and to governmental offices. And after all, we are a secret service, and most of the products that we have and most of the advice that we give will be classified information. However, part of our duty is also to inform the public, including Norwegian institutions and Norwegian companies, by presenting our analysis of expected developments in the threat situation. And for obvious reasons, we cannot give away classified information, but contributing to a common threat perception is still a priority for our service. And the significance of that work is perhaps greater now than ever before, as the threat landscape is becoming more and more complex. There are two main reasons for us why it is so important to take part in public discourse and to communicate to the public. The first one has to do with prevention. If we as a society shall protect ourselves, let's say from influence operation, from state actors, or from terrorism, we need a common understanding of the threat picture. So in our mind, threat communication is an integral part of prevention. Nobody can protect themselves if you don't know what it is you're protecting yourself from. So we help society understand what the threats are, against which kind of targets these threats are aiming their actions, and also what kind of methods they're using. The second reason that we engage in this has to do with reputation. A security service in a liberal democracy depends on our reputation as a trustworthy and reliable organization to be able to actually do our work. And ultimately, our goal is to protect the liberal democracy in Norway. And to do that, we think that we have to take part of it. And this ensures that we are trusted, and it also ensures that society understands us when we communicate threats. The main unclassified publication that we had through the course of the year is a national threat assessment. And this report covers threat from state actors and extremists in the year ahead, that is in the year coming. And it's intended to help facilitate a shared national understanding of the threat situation in Norway. And we want to enable actors in society to protect themselves against threats, to raise awareness in society in general, also to support the dialogue about the situation, and to be honest, also to ensure that we as a security service actually get tips from the public, as this is an important source of information for us to understand what is actually going on in a Norwegian society. And thankfully, our sister services, the NIS and the NNSA, also have their annual threat assessment for their areas of responsibility. So the NIS describes the threat picture outside of Norway, PST describes the threat picture inside of Norway, and the NNSA describes vulnerabilities and risks in Norway that can be used by these threat actors. And together, the three assessments provide essential input to the common understanding of the threat picture to Norway. We also, as Kjell Inge pointed out, we publish our assessment on the very same day, early in February each year. We also publish them on our website, and you can actually get them all in a printed version, and PST's version look like this, even exists in English. And during the past years, we have had a joint press conference with all the three services acting together. And the press conference is actually widely covered in Norway news media, so we get quite a lot of publicity in early February each year. And in PST, we use this product throughout the year in our outreach activity. And if there are changes in the threat situation that society needs to be informed about, after we have published the yearly threat assessment, then we make updated, often short assessments, which we publish on our website, and sometimes we also have press conferences concerning that. For example, this has been done when there's been changes in the terrorism threat. So, that was a little bit about what lies behind this project. Now I think I will give you a little bit about the key takeaways from the National Threat Assessment to give you an idea of the strategic messages that we try to convey to the public. And since I work with counterintelligence, I will focus on state actors. But for those of you who are interested in reading the complete version, you'll find it in English on our website, pst.no. So, over this past year, we have seen several examples in Europe of the severity in the threat from state actors. During 2024, Russia has succeeded in carrying out dozens of sabotage acts and disruptive activity on European soil, ranging from minor incidents like tagging to quite severe incidents, such as setting fire on warehouses. We have yet not seen these kinds of actions in Norway, but we assess it as likely that this will occur in Norway in 2025. So, unsurprisingly, we expect that Russia will remain the greatest threat against security in Norway. Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine and the deteriorating relationship between Russia and the West continue to characterize the threat situation. The security situation has increased Russian intelligence services' willingness to take risks, both in Europe and also in Norway. And as I said, we are particularly concerned that in 2025, Russia will try to carry out sabotage or disruptive activity in Norway. We also see that Russia is attempting to rebuild its capacity to engage in intelligence activities from its embassy in Oslo after the Norwegian government declared a number of intelligence officers persona non grata in Norway in 2023, and at that time severely reducing the number of intelligence officers from Russia in Norway. Another state that we focus on that is China. And the intelligence threat from China is significant, and we expect it to grow. And in the year ahead, Chinese intelligence and security services will continue to carry out information gathering to silence critical voices and to influence groups and individuals in Norway. And in our threat assessment, in addition to Russia and China, we also point to other countries like Iran and North Korea. So, that was a little bit about the states that pose a threat to Norway. Now we'll talk a little bit about intelligence targets and why they are targets. And in our threat assessment, we point to 6 different targets that we consider to be particularly vulnerable, and many of these are the same as in previous years. And this is because these targets are within areas where Norwegian politics, geography, or competence are of importance to and could affect other states' strategic and economic interests. The first target is political decision-making processes. And the main reason for this is that many political decisions made in Norway may affect other states' interests. And we have seen several operations against such processes and individuals in Norway. For example, in 2020 and 2021, when China and Russia conducted cyber operations against the Norwegian Parliament. The second target is the High North. And several states, such as Western China, have ambitions to strengthen their influence and secure their own interests in this area. And therefore, foreign states' intelligence services are actively working to collect information and to influence Norwegian processes for future development in the north. The third target is defense and preparedness. For example, the Norwegian Armed Forces and allied military activity in Norway have for a long time been of interest for foreign activity, especially from the Russian intelligence services, and this will continue. We also assess that targets connected to military support to Ukraine will be especially vulnerable in 2025 to intelligence operation. The fourth target is natural resources. And Norway administers natural resources that are of huge importance to other states' energy supply. And this has also been for a long time an intelligent target in Norway, and it will continue to be so. Maybe of greater importance now after the war in Ukraine than before. The fifth group is dissidents, opposition groups, and refugees. And we have seen that both China, Iran, and several other authoritarian states spend considerable resources in Norway on mapping, surveilling, influencing, and sometimes also threatening their own nationals residing in Norway. And they do this to undermine or to eliminate political opposition against their own regime. The last target that we point to is research and development. And research and development, for instance, within the field of technology, is important to preserve competitive power within the business and industry sector, and is also essential within the military domain. And Russia, in particular, needs Western technology to maintain its military capacity and ability to wage war in Ukraine. And last year, Russia tried to procure sanctioned technology from several Norwegian companies using Chinese intermediaries. We have also seen that companies in Europe are being exploited for covert procurement attempts from Russia. And this activity we expect will continue in 2025. Research institutions and knowledge enterprises are also vulnerable to approaches from foreign states. And we have several examples of foreign states using research collaboration and international conferences to gain access to sensitive technology or sensitive information. And the most active state in Norway concerning research institutions is China. Further, foreign states and their intelligence services operating in Norway use a range of different tools and methods for achieving their goals. And we expect to see recruitment of human resources in Norway, especially from the Russian and Chinese intelligence services. We also expect to see cyber operations. And the threat to Norway in the cyber domain is significant, but it's also unpredictable, as cyber operations are becoming increasingly more difficult to detect. Third, we also expect to see influence operations, and this includes a broad spectrum of means ranging from legitimate nation promotion on the one hand to illegal and illegitimate means on the other. And we expect that authoritarian states will engage in influence operations in Norway in 2025. Fourth, we expect to see foreign civilian vessels among Russian civilian vessels used as intelligence platform. Along Norway's coast, there is infrastructure and activity of interest to foreign states, and we expect civilian vessels to be used to map these assets. Fifth, we expect to see security threatening economic means. And this also covers a wide range of activities, for example, investments and acquisitions of property and companies in Norway. Last but not least, we also expect to see sabotage and disruptive activity. And as I pointed out earlier, we now assess that Russian intelligence services are likely to carry out sabotage acts against targets in Norway in 2025. And the purpose of these actions will be to prevent us from making deliveries to Ukraine or to influence public opinion on support for Ukraine in a negative direction. So, to sum up, we are facing a threat situation in Norway that is more challenging than it has been in a long time. And we think that 2025 will be marked by hybrid threats such as sabotage, influence, and illegal intelligence activity. And these methods, they create uncertainty, unrest, and fear in the population, and ultimately, they might also corrode democracy. This makes the threat from state actors more challenging than they ever have been in Norway. So, before I end my speech, I'd like to go back to our threat communication activities, since this is based upon our national assessment. Preparing and presenting the assessment in a joint press conference is sort of only the starting point for us. Threat communication is something that we constantly work on and that we do throughout the year. And PST has several teams working on awareness-raising activities. For instance, in our counterintelligence department, we have a unit designated to such activities. We also have district units that engage in similar activities outside of Oslo. And at the core of our threat communication and involvement with public debate is also our communication unit. And this team is keeping a very close touch with Norwegian media organization, and we receive among 1,000 requests for comments and contribution every month. We are also present in various social media services, and we also have our own podcast with episodes on a great variety of topics. Unfortunately, that one is in Norwegian. So all in all, PST's threat communication happens on many different arenas and also through many different channels. Thank you.
So thank you, Mrs. Blomberg and Professor Bjerge. Now let's move into the Icelandic security challenges. I give the floor to our Iceland Police Commissioner, Sigrid.
Good afternoon. My name is Sigrid Björk Guðjónsdóttir and I serve as a National Commissioner of the Icelandic Police. Dear colleagues, it is a great pleasure to speak at this gathering of dedicated professionals united by a shared commitment to security, preparedness, and public trust. Iceland is often perceived as one of the safest countries in the world. That reputation is well earned, but safety is not something that we inherit, it is something we maintain. And we are at crossroads right now because we are talking openly about security issues that has been that is a little bit complicated because it's new to us. For example, the response that I often get is that we are scaring the children by talking so openly, or that we could lose trust as a police organization if we talk about the threats. I hear that often as well. But in my opinion, that's a very naive response because it's all coming together. Threat from state actors into the threat of with the use of organized criminal gangs, and even the children being used as a means to damage or create some situations. So at the heart of this effort is our ability to understand risk clearly, methodically, and continually. In a rapidly changing world, risk is no longer confined to traditional categories. It evolves, it overlaps, and it often emerges where we least expect it. This is where strategic threat and risk assessment plays a vital role. And this responsibility lies with the National Security Unit, the NSU, within the Icelandic Police. We have not talked so much about the NSU, so I want to a little bit remark on how it came to. And the National Security Unit was established in 2007 when a legislative proposal for the reorganization of Icelandic law enforcement was already under parliamentary review. And the proposal included provisions for the establishment of an intelligence and risk assessment unit within the National Commissioner's Office. And this marked the beginning of what would become the National Security Unit, Iceland's central institution for counter-espionage, counter-terrorism, operation, and intelligence-led policing. In April 2007, the regulation on National Security Unit was formally issued, outlining the structure, responsibilities, and operational framework of Iceland's newly established National Security Unit. And the regulation provided clear definitions for various security assessments conducted by the NSU, including hazard assessment, systematic identification of threats to public safety, and then the risk assessment, evaluation of potential impact of security threats on lives, property, and economic activities, threat assessment, analysis of threats from human actions, particularly in relation to diplomatic missions, public officials, aviation security, and maritime security. The threat level, the classification of security threats based on intelligence analysis, guiding the appropriate level of police preparedness. And if I may state that, for example, the threat of terrorism is here on level 3 out of 5, while in some of the Nordic countries the level is higher, but the threat of organized crime is very high here, 4 out of 5. So it's not quite the same, even if we always look to the Nordic states and really find quite a lot of similarities. And then there is the strategic analysis, a long-term assessment of terrorist threats and organized crime trends, integrating domestic and international intelligence. And finally, the operational analysis, tactical intelligence work directly related to ongoing police investigations. The passage of law last year, number 95/2024, represents a significant legal shift, effectively providing the NSU with enhanced tools for proactive national security operations. These expanded authorities position the NSU as a central agency responsible for preemptive intelligence gathering, surveillance, and intervention against national security threats. While these new measures align Iceland with European and NATO security frameworks, they also introduce new challenges related to oversight, transparency, and civil liberties. The Director of Public Prosecutions is tasked with ensuring that the NSU's use of these expanded powers remains within the legal and ethical boundaries. And we are not, this unit is not separate, it's part of the National Commissioner, but has very clear boundaries that do not interact or collide with police business. So, while much attention is given rightfully to terrorism, our work extends far beyond that domain. And the NSU has conducted and published risk assessments on a wide range of social issues as well, including cybercrime and digital infrastructure vulnerabilities, hybrid threats, environmental scan of Icelandic law enforcement, money laundering and terrorist financing, youth violence and emerging extremist behaviors, organized crime with emphasis on transnational links, and more, many more. We also have the Civil Emergency Unit under our offices, and this is the body that will take care of every attack on a possible threat to life or property. May it be connected to a virus. I'm not sure we can mention the coronavirus anymore, but it can also be eruptions, and it can also be due to the law if there is a hostile, if there's a military action that connects to Iceland. So we already have quite a lot of infrastructure in place. But the assessments serve multiple purposes. They inform strategic planning, guide resource allocation, support operational readiness, and crucially, foster a shared understanding among public agencies, decision makers, and civil society. We do not conduct these assessments in isolation. Much of our strength lies in cooperation with Nordic partners, including those represented here today. In recent years, the collaboration between the NSU and the Norwegian PST, NSM, and E-tjenesten has increased, and these partnerships have led to better data, sharper analysis, and a more unified regional picture. We like to see ourselves as a little sibling of Norway in many aspects. We can always come knocking, and we are always well received. We always get the help and the information assist that we get. So thank you, just using the opportunity to you here. And we are especially inspired by Norway's commitment to open threat reporting. Transparency builds public confidence, and it also encourages institutions to work with greater discipline and clarity. We have tried to bring that same ethos into our own reporting practices in Iceland. Recently, the NSU made the report on the threat picture, where the conclusions are that the war in Ukraine increases the need for preparedness and resilience with a whole of society approach, total försvar, and we are working with that in many of our divisions. And recently I was at a meeting with the national commissioners of police in Europe, and there the forces are starting to prepare also what will be the effect when the war in Ukraine finally ends. What can we expect? How should we prepare? So that is part of that. And as I said before, the civil emergency system encompasses both threats and measures due to natural and man-made disasters. And there has been increased focus on the NATO 7 baseline requirements for national resilience. The main risk factors are hybrid threats and increased risk of espionage. We see the cyber threat already have we seen state-sponsored attacks here in Iceland. Organized crime, and as I said, the lines are becoming more blurry between the two. Threat against democracy, for example, with the acceleration approach to try and accelerate the downfall of democracy. We see also the fingerprints of that here, with misinformation and disinformation, using a bogus Icelandic social media figure to talk against Ukraine, for example. And the critical infrastructure, of course, that we always need to look at and protect. And our threat is very similar to the threat in our neighboring countries, but not quite the same, though. And we know that small societies like ours face particular challenges because we have limited resources and high expectations of trust. And I was very happy to hear from our Norwegian colleague that the money should not only be focused on defense, but also on the civilian matters, just for those who are decision makers in the country. This is a very important part. I hope everybody heard. But we also have the strengths. We have agility, adaptability, and the ability to act quickly across institutional lines. Okay, this did not go well. I will just have to read it for you. For us, openness is not a luxury. It is a necessity. We go in the media when we have made mistakes, and we own it, and we apologize, and we try to make sure it doesn't happen again. When we share what we know responsibly and respectfully, we not only prevent harm, but also strengthen the democratic foundations that make long-term security possible. I, for one, am proud of the progress we have made, and I know we have much more to learn, which is why conferences like this matter. Thank you, Valberg, and thank you, Cecilia. Thank you.
Thank you for this. As you know, most of our events we are cooperating with others, embassies or different organizations. In this case, we were cooperating with the National Police of Iceland, but also with the Norwegian Embassy. And fantastic to work with them. And I would like to give the Ambassador, Cecilia Willoch, the Norwegian Ambassador to Iceland. Please give the closing remarks.
Jeg skal bare si at det er frábært å være Noregs sendiherre á Íslandi. As a Norwegian ambassador to Iceland, it is always very striking to see how much cooperation there is between institutions and organizations, within companies, between companies, and between people and individuals under the level of the formal Nordic cooperation. To me, this very huge anthill of Nordic sharing and of sharing of experience and cooperation, and not the least of inspiration, mutual inspiration, is the fabric of the Nordic family. And in these times, when we are all searching for the best way to inform ourselves about the direction to take and the uncertainties that we see, the public and open discussion about safety and security, about the risks and the threats, is perhaps more important than ever before. An open and well-informed conversation is not sufficient to guarantee that the best decisions be made. But without such an open conversation, the risks are much higher that we do not manage to make good or to make the necessary decisions. So I think it is extremely valuable that insights into how we produce and avail ourselves of situational awareness as a basis also for this open conversation in the Nordic countries, that these insights are also shared. We are sufficiently different to do things differently, and we shall respect that. But we are also sufficiently similar to take inspiration from each other. And I believe this is important, along with all the other things we do together. And Carlos, now I need your help. Can you give me the sheet of paper under my pillow, my glasses? Because today, as Professor Bjerga said, this is an auspicious day. It is 80 years since the liberation of Europe after Second World War. And some of us this morning, we met at the 330 Squadron's Memorial Stone at Nautholsvik. We do this every year, and you are all welcome. But as Professor Bjerge mentioned, the Prime Minister of Norway chose this very day to publish the national security strategy. And it is to be found on the Norwegian government's website, and it looks like this. This is the one Professor Bjerge mentioned. So with this, I just want to thank the Minister, who unfortunately had to leave us. It was inspirational to listen to her. And to thank you, the Commissioner of Icelandic Police, for having us. Thank you so much, Professor Bjerge and Ms. Blomberg, for coming and sharing with us. And thank you, Varberg, for propelling into existence this very seminar and for being the motor behind this. And for all of you, thank you for coming. It's been most inspirational. Thank you. I think we're done.